Welcome to HortTube. My name is Jim Putnam. This is the garden question and answer video that I do most Sundays. You can ask gardening questions down below this video and I'll pick from those the next time I'm picking questions. I'm shooting this video on Tuesday and I have two Q&As I'm shooting back to back. So the one you're watching right now and next Sunday's came from last Sunday's. I'm making a trip and I needed to shoot, but I was able to get 40 some questions out of just that one video. So thank you guys for participating. Whatever questions you ask below this one and next week's, I'll pick from both of those for the following one when I'm back to making another question and answer video, if that makes any sense. Just keep asking great questions you guys have all along, and the video gets bigger each week and there's just great questions. I think you can see all the color back here behind me. The sun is at a bit of a weird angle, but the garden has really come to life. All the annuals that we've planted in videos the last few weeks are all filling in and growing really quickly. There's a big pile of mulch on the driveway that just came yesterday. Need to get started on that in the next couple days. I put up a watering video on the Learn to Garden video series. You can purchase that over on my website, HortTube.com. Thank you to folks who have purchased it. I meant to get that watering video up right about on Sunday, the day the last question and answer. It rained like all weekend long, which was good. I'm not complaining about rain. Reservoirs are full and I'm happy for all that we don't have to worry about water restrictions or anything this year. So better to have the rain than not have the rain, that's for sure. But it does slow you down on things here and there, trying to accomplish things. But the garden is really, again, it's come to life really, really quickly over the last week or two. But it's quite cool here. I'm in a jacket in, the first day of May in the garden. And you guys know I'm still in shorts, but I'm in shorts and a short sleeve shirt, and that way for most of the year. But we've had days in the 60s for highs, which is very unusual for us at this point. I think it's warming up into the 80s over the next week or two. A couple of videos you will have seen from this past week, a video on annuals for the sun and annuals for the shade, spring pruning video, and something else for sure. Something else will have gone up as well. Tidying up all of my topiaries out here. We have several topiaries that I've created, actually all from clearance plants for the most part. If you want to go back and watch that video, I think that video will be up the day before you're watching this video. And I just went through and tidied them up and showed how I maintain the topiaries out here and how I can evolve them and change them over time. So let's jump into some questions. So somebody has talked about keeping squirrels away from their bird feeder. We actually we use the pepper. You can buy the bird seed with the hot pepper already on it, and it's not the least expensive thing in the world, but you can also buy a liquid, and we will buy our bird seed in big bags, 50-pound bags, and then when we fill the bird feeder, we mix a little bit of that liquid pepper, basically a pepper spray, onto the seed, which has no impact whatsoever on non-mammals. Capsaicin, which is in peppers, is only to keep mammals from eating them. So the birds have no problem whatsoever eating the hot seed, but the squirrels tend to stay away from it. That's how we keep squirrels away from our bird feeders. But we have lots of squirrels out here doing all kinds of other mischief. Okay, somebody asked me about the trenching shovel that I have. I'll grab it real quick. Okay. Here's the trenching shovel, and I think I've had this one maybe 15 years or so. It was about 4 or 5 inches longer than this. I'll link one down below the video, but I can't find this exact same one anymore. And I've bought a couple more that I'm not as happy with. This one just had the perfect angle on it. I wish I could just get somebody to make them for us, and then I'd sell them to you guys, because this one is absolutely perfect. The fiberglass handle here is just got all kinds of cracks in it and it's falling apart, but I continue to use it out here. It is a great tool. I get comments on videos where I'm using this trenching shovel, the occasional comment that's like, I gotta get you a real shovel. I gotta get you a real shovel. And I can plant plants 5 times faster than any person making that comment with that trenching shovel any day of the week. I know that for sure. I am just really fast at planting anyway. I used to get paid to plant plants, and when you get paid to plant plants and you're the boss of the company that gets paid to plant plants, you get pretty fast at planting plants and planting them well, because you're also guaranteeing them. So both of those things need to happen. But yes, this trenching shovel is just absolutely fantastic. And there's, you know, it's just so easy to cut roots with it, to dig in compacted soil with it. And it's just overall much faster. You're taking smaller chunks of soil out of the hole, but it's overall faster. Okay. So, somebody said that they don't see me tamping the soil around my annuals. So when I plant, you know, flying through planting these annuals back here in the videos, we're using this compost and it settles around them really easily. So you don't really need to stomp them down if you have a loose base of soil. So if I'm using pine bark soil conditioner or compost or cow manure or something like that, you don't really have to tamp them down. There's no tamping it down anyway. It's kind of a fluffy mix that I'm planting these annuals into. And I don't pack the soil really tight around plants. If you've ever seen me plant anything or seen a video where I'm planting something, I tamp the soil down very, very gently around the plant. So I want to get the big air pockets removed, but we need small air pockets. These plants breathe. There's another question, I think maybe it's in the next Sunday's list, about some flooding issues where, you know, when you get standing water in the garden, that can have some impact on how oxygen exchange. You need an oxygen exchange under the ground. The plants are breathing under there too. So be careful, you know, packing soil really tightly around things. Get the big air pockets out for sure. Let's see. Somebody asked about planting under silver maples. They were in the Charlotte area. Silver maples are really difficult to garden with. I had a fairly large silver maple at the old house, and of course they run their gauntlet in about 20 years in an urban space. They grow like mad, and then the roots reach the maximum amount of area they can take, and they seem to fall apart in urban environments. I don't know if that will happen to yours or not, but that's been my experience with silver maples in urban settings here in the South. They're just trying to plant under them. So with maples, you get not only the giant surface roots, but then you also get this crazy fibrous root system on the top as well. And so they're difficult to plant around. The things you're going to want to use, I keep referencing this video I shot with Mark Wethington about dry shade plants, but you're going to want to plant things that, you know, can compete in dry shade, and then also try to find the smallest containers that you can buy. I had my spot at the farmer's market. The first 10 years I was at that farmer's market spot, I was actually just growing trade gallon containers. So these are the small 3-quart containers that used to be called gallon containers, but then now you have to call them 3 quarts or something. But this is because it's actually just 3 quarts. These 3-quart containers, I used to sell so many of on shrubs at the farmer's market. I was the only person out there with things that you'd normally see in 5, 7, 15 gallon containers, but I had them in little 1 gallon or 3-quart pots and sold them like crazy, because there's a ton of people who have lots of roots to dig around, or they have rocky soil, or they have super compacted soil, or they're older or whatever. And so I did a pretty good business actually selling smaller containers, and I think a lot of people need that. Somebody asked if I have snakes. I don't have snakes here. There's no, I haven't seen a couple little worm snakes, and I saw one, a larger black snake that had been run over here about 2 blocks away last year. It was the only real snake I've seen since I've been here of any size at all. At the old house, I had lots of copperheads, and so, you know, that was copperhead. You know, I was in Johnston County, North Carolina, and one day I came home for lunch from the nursery, and Holly was always with me, just like she is now. She's on the back porch right here sleeping. She jumped out of the truck. I got out of the truck. She jumped out of the truck behind me, and she takes off down the sidewalk to the front door and walks over 2 copperheads that were mating on the sidewalk. Just walked right over top of them, and they were preoccupied, so they didn't care. So, but I had lots of snakes at the old house, and been around snakes forever. I mean, my nursery was just absolutely chock-a-block full of snakes, and you know, they don't really scare me all that much. I don't like the number of copperheads that we have. When I was a kid here, we'd rarely see poisonous snakes, and now it seems like the vast majority of snakes I've seen in the last 15 to 20 years have been copperheads, you know, or other poisonous snakes. It seems like because everybody kills all of the black snakes and all of the kind of beneficial snakes because they can see them. The best camouflage snake, which is copperheads, are actually quite beautiful, quite striking, but they're also very well camouflaged in leaf litter. They seem to have won by humans killing the other snakes, which is kind of wild. So, you know, don't kill your black snakes. Don't, you know, they're the ones that will help take care of some of those copperheads when they're smaller. Let's see, plant in the garden. Oh, okay. So somebody has asked a couple times. I saw it last week and then I forgot to answer it. The plant at the Atlanta Botanic Garden, we were in the interview in the second spot we stopped in the main entry garden that we talked about for a few minutes, that new garden. They wanted to know what the yellow stripe was that represented the river. And it was sweet flag, Ogon, Acarus, or sweet flag, and that variety is called Ogon that they're using there. There was dwarf mondo, and then there was some black mondo in there too, but it was all really striking, and I don't think the camera really picked it up all that well. I've got another video from that where I walked around with a stabilizer and I was just going to talk over it like I did Ram's video last week. It might be a couple weeks before I get that video done, but I do have another video from there where I'm going to talk through more of the plants. That video that I put up was more of an interview and talking about the Atlanta Botanic Garden and that kind of thing. The other one will be more a little more plant-based, which is more typical of the channel. Let's see, so somebody has some sort of dwarf arborvitae, and there's black down at the bottom. So here's an arborvitae right here. If it was a giant black spot right there, I would assume that Griffin came out here and peed on it. Almost all arbs are thuja are very sensitive to urine, and so the Goldie or whatever that thuja occidentalis I have out on the corner, I can't walk Griffin that direction because he targets that thing every time and it ends up with this little black spot in the bottom of it. But if you see a black place in the bottom of one, that's probably what it was a dog, potentially a dog urinating on it. Let's see. So somebody said they always hear hosta are great in the shade, but they see some of the best ones in Charlotte in the full sun. Two things. Number one, there are hosta that are definitely more adaptable to the sun, and you can Google that and find out. There's a pretty good list of ones that are more sun tolerant. The gold ones and the white variegated ones tend to be ones that definitely need to be in part shade or even shade conditions because they'll burn. The other thing I would point out is be careful looking at a hosta in April or May and judging how much sun it can tolerate, because it's a long summer ahead. I have a neighbor over here I've walked past pretty much every morning, and out of the blue they put in about 15 hosta right out by their mailbox, variegated hosta. They're brightly variegated hosta, and I haven't seen them walk out the side, and I don't know whether I'd say anything to them or not. I don't know if it's, you know, it seems like, I don't know, it seems kind of rude to go, hey, you planted those in the wrong place, dummy, or whatever. I don't know how they would take it. You know, it wouldn't be the way I would deliver it, but, you know, might be the way they'd take it. But they've planted about, I think they won't die, they'll just burn during the summertime. So if you're seeing them look great in the spring, that doesn't mean they're going to look great in August. Also, there are some, though, that are more sun tolerant. Okay. So somebody said, what are the more heat tolerant families of plants that are also deer resistant? And, you know, always the Lamiaceae. I put up that video last year on the mint family. All of those things are deer resistant. All the salvias and the basil and agastache and bee balm and, you know, all those things that are in that plant family rarely get eaten by any rabbits or deer. And then, of course, you know, most of those plants are pretty bulletproof once they're established. There's it's not up enough yet to see. There's a Blue Fortunes agastache behind me right here. You know, those are definitely going to be in that category. And then some of our viburnum varieties, some are deer resistant and some aren't, but they tend to be, you know, tough plants in drier conditions. Especially some of our native viburnum, Loropetalum. That's you know, you talk about whole plant family that's going to be deer resistant. That's going to include witch hazel, Loropetalum, Distellium. You know, all of those are pretty tough plants. They're very different, but they're all pretty tough plants and are deer resistant. Let's see, somebody got lots of comments about sunshine ligustrum being thin. Mine's very thin, but I'm looking over there right now and it's definitely fuller than it was even 2 days ago. So I expect by the time I look at it again when I get back, it'll be fully leafed out again. They're those Chinese privet. This is a sterile Chinese privet, so it's a non-invasive Chinese privet, that gold sunshine ligustrum. They're really tardily deciduous, meaning they hold their leaves through the winter and then the new leaves push off the old leaves. But sometimes that thing gets confused and it drops the leaves 2 months before the new leaves come out. And it's just pretty common appearance or common thing about it. And I've had it happen every other year on that one. So it's happened 2 out of 3 years. One other year it didn't drop a single leaf. It didn't appear to drop a single leaf. When the new leaves came in the spring, it did drop some old leaves, but it couldn't tell it because the new leaves were coming on. But, you know, that's the case with a lot of plants, but some of them will occasionally just drop the leaves early. But I haven't figured out what it is with that plant, what triggers it. Why is it different year to year? I have no idea. And I've asked the question of other people, so I don't know that anybody knows really. So somebody has Fat Albert Blue Spruce, and they're in zone 8 and wanted to know where they would put it in the landscape. And I would definitely put it in morning sun and afternoon shade. So any kind of spruce in zone 8 here in the southeast. I'm in zone 7B or 8A, and my blue spruce, which was in the conifer videos from last week, it's getting a couple hours of direct midday sun, and that's about it. It's actually in the morning shade and it's already in the shade from this tree behind me right now, but that's one that here in the south, definitely morning sun, afternoon shade. That should work absolutely perfect. But keep in mind that you may have to move something. When you're guessing at where something is going to do best, you're not always going to knock it out of the park. You know, if it starts stretching on you or it's underperforming, it may tell you it needs to be in a little more sun. If it's burning at all, it may tell you it needs to back up into some more shade too. So be prepared when you're testing areas for things to be able to move them. A lot of people don't know where they have morning shade and afternoon sun. I got the questions all the time at the farmer's market. I'd ask people, well, we need plants for our foundation. And I think, which direction does it face? Is it sunny? Is it shady? They haven't really spent a lot of time in the garden. You know, they're at work a lot of the day, and so they don't know what it's like in the middle of the day for certain things. So, you know, a lot of times it's a study. You know, you'll come to learn different things about different spaces in your garden over the years. Let's see. Somebody has a 30-year-old azalea dying a branch at the time, and they Googled and said it was insect damage, and they've been putting neem oil on it. I doubt your azalea dying one branch at the time is actually an insect-related thing. The insects that azaleas get are called lace bugs, and they're little black spots on the back of the leaf. You can turn over the leaves and see them. They tend to be active probably May, June mostly, and they'll spot the top of the leaves. You'll see spotting on the top of the leaves, but generally speaking, they don't like kill branches at the time. They can thin the plant, make it less vigorous, that kind of thing. But usually that limit the time death could either be Phytophthora root rot. That's one thing that will kill kind of a branch at the time. Or it could be that they've just reached an age where they are selectively pruning themselves with the roots under the ground. So the roots are in competition with one another under the ground, because those azaleas become like colonies. You know, they get not only wider and bigger at the top, but you'll get suckering happening down at the bottom of them too. And some of those suckers might be killing other suckers. So that could be it as well. You could try on a 30-year-old azalea just to cut it back really, really hard after it's finished blooming right now and see what will flush back out of it. I kind of rely on shrubs for, when I put a shrub in the ground, I'm thinking that 20, 25 years from now, I'm probably going to I'm making a decision to pull it out. It's probably going to outgrow the area. It's probably going to outgrow its own vigorous nature. You know, it's going to be less vigorous in the future, perform, you know, less in the future. It doesn't mean all things. You know, trees I expect to have forever. Screening plants I would love to have more than 20 or 25 years for sure. But some of these shrubs I'm putting in, you know, I've done this for long enough to know that when a landscape gets to be about 20, 25 years old, there's probably a few things in it that need to come out that are just tired. And so I don't know if that, fits your 30-year-old azaleas or not. I get so many redbud questions. I will do a video. That's Golden Falls redbud right there. I'll do a video on redbud maintenance coming up because I feel like it's probably the vast majority. It's not the majority, but it's the number one question I get every week is 47 different questions about redbuds. So I need to do a video on redbuds and redbud maintenance and a lot of these hybrid redbuds like this one. A lot of folks are buying them very short, and then, every branch on this thing weeps. You want to buy one of these weeping redbuds at the height you want it. I would not buy one that's shorter than that because otherwise you're going to have to stake a limb up to get more height out of it. So keep that in mind. I bought that one already that height. It's maybe added a few inches of height, but that's it. Every branch just comes straight down. So keep that in mind. But I'm going to do a redbud specific video for the folks that have all the redbud questions. Somebody said I should do a Hosta tour at Plant Delights. I think that'd take like 3 years to cover all the Hosta at Plant Delights. There's so many. It's wild. And we have quite a collection here now, and it will probably continue to grow. Just there's so many neat ones continue to come out. But yes, I will cover Hosta with Tony Avent. There's not a bigger expert in America on Hosta than Tony for sure. And one of the trips down there while the Hosta are looking fresh, we'll definitely cover them. So somebody had planted a row of Yoshino cryptomeria. They're about 2 feet from a winterberry holly. Should they move the winterberry holly? You're going to move the winterberry holly, or the cryptomeria are going to remove the winterberry holly for you. Those cryptomeria get 75 feet tall and 20 feet wide. So at some point your winterberry holly is going to lose that battle against that Yoshino cryptomeria. So yes, I'd go ahead and move them sooner than later. Let's see. Does the age of a conifer matter and how hard you can cut it back? No, just the type of conifer matters and how hard you can cut it back. Some are not going to tolerate super hard pruning. It's something I might Google if you were going to try it. There's probably somebody out there has some actual experience, not somebody who's just talking through their ears, but there's probably somebody out there who has actual experience in cutting the ones back that you have. Most of the Chamaecyparis, like Fire Chief I just picked up, or Gold Mop Cypress, I talked about in the maintenance for the topiary video, that Gold Mop Cypress, I talked about in that. I cut one back from 8 feet down to 3 feet and had no problem. It came right back out of it. Again, it was one of those 20-year-old plants, and I was like, okay, well, it has to go, or I'm going to attempt first to cut it hard. And it had no problem coming back out of it. But I think there's some conifers, yes, you wouldn't be able to do hard cutbacks on, at a certain age. They're just not going to have a lot of dormant buds down in the old wood, they'll regenerate new growth. But I would, if you have the specific conifer in mind, I would Google it. But most of my Chamaecyparis, my cryptomeria, most junipers tolerate, hard pruning. Some of the spruces are probably not going to be, as happy with it. Okay, let's see. Okay, so somebody has sewer lines. Okay, their HOA is making them replace a tree in their yard, but they have a sewer line out there and wanted to know whether or not they should put any particular kind of tree. Sewer lines I don't worry about. Septic fields are a little different, but sewer lines I don't worry about. This neighborhood has 85-year-old white oaks sitting right on top of the sewer lines in this neighborhood, and they haven't destroyed the sewer lines. I'm sure sewer lines aren't happy. I'm sure none of that battle is very happy, but sewer lines are down pretty deep, and they're pretty, they're pretty rigid. Again, I don't plant, the things that would probably be the most problematic are river birches, and I don't think your front garden is a river. So I try to get people to, there's a hint in the name for that plant. It really doesn't like your probably doesn't like your dry front yard. And then red maples, silver maples, a lot of those super aggressive rooting trees. I don't really like cherries because they're super aggressive rooting as well. I love cherry trees. Again, my My Kwanzaa cherry at the old house was the most aggressive rooting plant that I had in the entire garden, including my river birch. So, you know, take that for what it's worth. You can, you know, these oaks are very, you know, they're a little more forgiving just in general. If you want a tree, I might go for some sort of native oak or some sort of smaller ornamental tree, that Kyananthus or that Tokyo Tower Chinese fringe tree or native fringe tree, Amelanchier, serviceberry. Maybe too sunny for redbuds. I have no idea what your front garden looks like, but you can look up smaller ornamental trees. The sewer line won't have any problem with them, but I wouldn't get the most aggressive rooting trees is kind of my point there. So somebody asked me about rose replant disease. So this is what it's been deemed, where you take something out of a hole that was diseased and you replant the same exact species back in the same spot. They call it rose replant disease. And so, you know, the only time I ever worry about replanting the same thing back in the same hole is if it died of something, you know, of a disease, or maybe even an insect problem, because that insect is still going to be present there, or the stresses that created that situation for the insect to be able to damage your plant are still going to be there. So that's the only time I worry about it. So did your rose die of a disease problem? Then I'm definitely not going to put another rose back in that hole. I get the question all the time about rotating my tomatoes. Well, this is a 0.19 acre lot. Rotating my tomatoes 10 feet in a vegetable garden or 20 feet in my only sunny spot is not going to change life. The only thing that would stop me from growing tomatoes out there is if I had some sort of disease, and then I would take a break for a few years from planting them in that same spot. I would continue to compost it, continue to improve the soil, hope that I could get past it, and then I'd come back in there, maybe skip a couple seasons. But I can't really back here root, or I can't really rotate them anywhere. I don't have any other sunny space. But again, the only reason I would is if I had a disease problem. So that's my take on that. If you're pulling something out that was healthy, the next year you can come right back in with it. I would imagine, though, if you're removing a shrub, it probably had some sort of issue that made you remove it, and I would maybe go to a completely different thing when you plant it. But that's what that's all about. Somebody asked if this is orange rocket barberry. Back here, the orange barberry. I don't know what the shovel is in the way or not. That little barberry right there, is it in the? Let me make sure it's actually in the frame. Yeah, that little orange barberry that's right there. That one's actually called Luton Rouge. It's a newer one from the Southern Living Plant Collection. There's probably almost no availability on it. Orange Rocket goes very upright and narrow, where that one grows as a little round ball. Somebody wants to put creeping thyme on a bank as a ground cover. They needed to know if they needed to clear everything. Yes, you'd have to. And then when you tell me, I don't want to clear an entire bank at one time, because then I'm worried about erosion and that kind of thing. So you might clear a spot that becomes your feeder area for it. So you could clear, you know, a few square feet of it, plant your creeping thyme in there, let it fill in, and then you can transplant some of that. You can divide it out into other areas and expand from there. Otherwise, it's going to cost you a heck of a lot of money, because, you know, to get it covered, and you have the threat of erosion in between waiting for that to happen. So maybe do it a block at the time and just keep the other stuff cut down in the meantime. So somebody asked if you should limb up a 30-year-old star magnolia. I would think a star magnolia would have limbed itself up in 30 years. I mean, they would block the sun down at the bottom. But yeah, you can if you want to. That's really, do you have space for it to be limbed all the way to the ground? If you do, then leave it alone. If you'd like to tuck things up under it, I'm a big fan of limbing larger growing shrubs up over the years and tucking other things out in front of them. That's just my gardening style, though. If the tree seems healthy and you're fine with it being limbed down to the ground, then it's totally fine. Okay, so last question for this week, and then I'm going to literally turn the camera off and start another question and answer that's for the next Sunday. Okay, so somebody asked about they're getting the leaf mold from their town. So like the city of Raleigh comes around and picks up all the leaves in the fall, comes and sucks them up with a vacuum over the winter, and then takes them, and then you can buy them back from them. and wanted to know if it was going to give them any weed seeds. Yeah, of course. I mean, it's possible. It hasn't been composted. Don't know if it was raked, you know, off of their lawn and it was just all fall weed seeds. Of course, anything's possible. My buddy Rob over here, who you guys have seen his beautiful camellias, his garden, it's a block and a half from me over here. He uses the leaf mold and it's built his soil up beautifully. Works great. That's the mulch he likes to use, and he doesn't really have any weed problems over there because his yard is mostly shady. So that's probably having a negative impact on any weed seeds that are in it. If you were putting that leaf mold out in the full sun, then you would see if you were going to have weed seeds in it. I don't think you always would, but it's definitely possible. So there you go. Thank you guys very much. Thank you to everybody who's bought the Learn to Garden series over on my website, and everybody who's bought the Plant Nerd shirt, because there's a lot of folks that have bought that shirt. I'm absolutely amazed by it. It's linked over on my website as well. So thank you guys very much for purchasing those. And ask gardening questions down below, and I'll be back next week with another question and answer video.